I'd like to introduce you to our world correspondent, Judah Robinson. He has more on this story.
Good morning, Versha. We landed in Djibouti about 5 p.m. Random government official came up to us demanding that we hand our passports. We haven't seen our passports since. Good evening. Let's count down and get to the news you need to know. At number 4, the state of Georgia could risk losing some major Hollywood cash if it enacts those strict new abortion laws. Disney and Netflix are considering a filming boycott of the state. The companies are fighting back over Georgia's new ban on abortions at 6 weeks, which is when a heartbeat is first detected, but before most women even know that they're pregnant.
I've come to Turkey at a time of uncertainty for queer refugees that are living here. I'm on my way to a city named Denizli to meet Ali, a 31-year-old queer refugee from Iran who never thought that he'd be stuck here for years.
Hi, nice to see you. Nice to see you. Welcome to Turkey.
You're not provided housing, you're not provided food or a stipend for food, you're not allowed to work, and you're not allowed to leave this city. So how are you supposed to survive?
This is a big question in my mind.
At number 2, the massive protests sweeping Hong Kong even as the government backs down from a controversial bill. And at number 1, Iran is set to break a key part of the 2015 nuclear deal as tensions with the US escalate by the day. Iran threatened to exceed its enriched uranium stockpile in just 10 days, unless it gets relief from sanctions imposed by the US. So what was the biggest story for you today? Tell me in the comments below, and be sure to follow our Facebook page for more news. We'll see you right back here tomorrow night for more news you need to know.
Prison-like facilities like these are popping up and rapidly expanding across the southern US. But no state has seen its immigrant detention capacity spike so quickly as Louisiana, which has begun turning former jails into immigrant detention facilities.
Were you expecting a federal agency like ICE to come into these local parish prisons and fill up these jails?
I don't think that that's something that we considered at all.
But within the last 6 months, ICE has come in and filled up these jails with an estimated 8,000. Is it fair to say that Louisiana is not the prison capital of the states and then the prison capital of the world if you're incarcerating more bodies? They're just not in the state system.
I don't know how the numbers compare to the other states and how those stack up, but certainly I guess it just depends on how you measure it. You know, I mean,
Louisiana is the #1 detainer of asylum seekers next to Texas.
And the state of Louisiana has virtually no authority to prevent the federal government from inserting those detainees into facilities in Louisiana.
But there's a reason why they're specifically drawn to Louisiana.
I'm not sure why Louisiana is such an attractive place to do business for the federal government and for these detainees.
The United States' longest-running war ever, its war in Afghanistan, now extends into its 17th year and shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon. It's still hard to determine who exactly is winning this war, but it's very clear to see that innocent Afghan civilians are the ones losing the most. Just last year, the UN said that over 10,000 civilians were killed or injured in the country, and it fears that number will be considerably higher this year. Versha?
It's hard to believe that we are actually living through the longest war in American history. It's now taken up most of our lifetimes, as you mentioned, but it seems like we should be talking more about it every day. Now, I know you mentioned a couple points of progress or actual regression, but what are the major reasons that you think we're still there after 17 years?
Yeah, well, a number of experts that I've spoken to, human rights researchers and political experts on this region, they all say the same thing. They say the first was in 2002 and 2003, the country became distracted by other things, predominantly its war in Iraq. It shifted its military resources and intelligence resources to Iraq instead of Afghanistan. The other thing that they say is that throughout the entire war, you know, the US and the Taliban itself, they've both focused on fighting. They've both focused on the military side of things and not political solutions. Neither side is willing to, you know, sit down at the negotiating table and hammer out a deal for the Afghan people.
All right, well, we'll be paying close attention to whether or not the U.S. makes any progress on that this week specifically, with the anniversary just being yesterday. Thank you so much, Judah.
For this episode of Now This World, we're in the Kakuma refugee camp that was created in 1992 for these children, to speak to some of the refugees who still live here more than 20 years later.
And find out what happens when a camp that was built as a temporary solution becomes a permanent home.
The United States refugee admissions program has officially hit an all-time low. During his time in office, President Trump has consistently decreased the number of refugees that are accepted into the United States, a stark contrast to his predecessor. Now, that fiscal year is set to expire this Sunday, and not even half of the 45,000 available slots have been filled. I sat down with the International Rescue Committee's David Miliband, who said America's entire resettlement program is now at risk.
And Americans need to understand that the fate of their refugee resettlement program, one which has been a world leader for 30 or 40 years, is really now at stake, because once you're down to 20 or 30,000 refugees, America, far from being a leader of refugee resettlement, becomes a laggard.
This last year's quota was 45,000 and only 20,000 had been admitted. Why is that? How did that happen?
Well, it happened partly because of the ban. Remember, the 11 countries were banned. Partly because of the new vetting procedures that have got clogged up the system.
Hunger isn't a new issue for this country. It's experienced mass waves of drought, famine, and severe hunger as recently as 2017. But these issues have only been exacerbated by the country's civil war. We're here at Kakuma's reception center to meet with new arrivals from South Sudan. This is the place where they become refugees. I spoke to an aid worker who was here in 2014 after the war broke out. At number 2, evacuations along the swollen Arkansas River as it breaks through a levee. The National Weather Service warned Little Rock that a historic flood event is expected in the coming days. And at number 1, President Trump's threat to hit Mexico with stiff tariffs over immigration. What started as a tweet became an official White House statement. The US will put a 5% tariff on all Mexican goods until, quote, the illegal immigration problem is remedied. Mexico's president pushed back gently, saying social problems are not solved with duties or coercive measures. So what was the biggest story for you today? Tell me in the comments below, and be sure to follow our Facebook page for more news. We'll see you right back here next week for more news you need to know.